Hello everyone and welcome back. This week we're continuing our series on the Beatles albums, checking out different variations of them, how they look, what they contain, and talking a little bit about how they sound. And this week being the 7th episode of the series, we are looking at the 7th studio album from the UK, released on the 5th of August 1966, both in the UK and in the US, Revolver. Since 1963, the Beatles had released 2 main albums each year, at least based on the UK discography. Based on the US one, they had released many more, of course. And they had toured restlessly across the world and had a lot of shows, a lot of presences at radio and television. 1966 had been the first year in which, at least based on the UK catalog, they had released only one main album, that being Revolver. Later in the year, in December, they released a compilation called A Collection of Oldies. But in the US, earlier that year, in June, they had released Yesterday and Today, which was basically a compilation of leftover songs from Help, Rubber Soul, and 3 songs that were going to be on the Revolver album. Obviously, when the Revolver album was later released in the US, it only had 11 tracks, which were the ones that were left from the main UK album. The 3 tracks left out of the US Revolver album that were present on Yesterday and Today and basically just released early in the US compared to the rest of the world were I'm Only Sleeping, And Your Bird Can Sing, and Dr. Robert. Worth mentioning that in the same year, 1966, the Beatles also released a couple of singles, one of them off of the Revolver album with Eleanor Rigby and Yellow Submarine, and one of them, which was also a great success and accompanied this album for that year, the double Paperback Writer and Rain. Now, in the past few years, it has become more and more common knowledge that Revolver was a revolutionary album, not only for its time, but for the history of music in general, as did Rubber Soul before it, and as did Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road after it. But Revolver has gained more traction in the past few years, and while up until the, let's say, 2000s or late 2000s, Sgt. Pepper was considered to be the most important Beatles album, I think it is becoming apparent that Revolver is challenging that first spot in the past few years. There are many things that can be said about Revolver, about the music on it, the orchestration, the instruments used, the techniques used for recording, the lyrics to some of the songs, but I can say that for me, as a young kid in the mid-90s, listening to this for the first time, there were a few things that left a strong impression, even from the first moment I had listened to the album. So Eleanor Rigby with its string orchestration really impressed me. I had never heard something like that or expected to hear something like that on a pop rock album, and the lyrics, the storytelling were so vivid. It was extraordinary for me at the time. Here, There and Everywhere, it's a soft romantic song, let's say, but for me it acted as a mood changer. It really lifted my spirits every time I heard it. It just gave me this pleasant mood when listening to it. The other one that I remembered even from then was For No One. It was just so direct and raw in its lyrics and its delivery that it just again was impressive. And then the last one that I remember very vividly was Tomorrow Never Knows, just because it's such a collection of sounds. It's at the same time jarring, but also it has music, some music to it, right? And the lyrics again were really impressive for maybe basically almost a teenager at the time. In the years since then, of course, I came to understand more of how this album was produced and understand how much the fact that the Beatles had stopped touring influenced this album. The fact that they were focused in being a studio band on elevating their music, their unspoken competition with people like Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys or Bob Dylan had a role into how they developed as musicians at the time. But at the same time, there are other external factors like LSD for a couple of them, for Paul McCartney, his involvement on the avant-garde art scene from that day. So all of these things kind of influenced the way that Revolver was shaped as an album and as an art piece, if you will. before we start properly, let's take a quick run through the items that we have here today. So we're going to start with the vinyl. We have 3 Revolver pressings, a 1980 UK stereo press, and then the 2022 mono and stereo issues from the Revolver 2022 box set. Of course, the mono is completely analog, taken directly from the mono master tapes, whereas the stereo one is the new mix by Giles Martin. Then on this side we have one cassette. This is just to show a little bit because it's part of that collection that I started showing with Rubber Soul, released by the Polish poker label in the 1990s, more or less pirate label. But I thought it would be a fun idea to look at it, to look at how it was designed, as well as how the track listing looks. But then on the CD front, we have the 1987 stereo CD, we have the 2009 mono and stereo CDs, we have the 2014 US mono and stereo combined CD from with the Capitol label from the Beatles US Albums box set. And then we also have the 2022, again, mono and stereo CDs from the 2022 box set. Okay, so let's get to it. The first one that we're going to be looking at is this 1980 or circa 1980 stereo pressing of Revolver from the UK. This one is one of the ones with the Harry Moss initials etched in the dead wax. In the meantime, because in the previous videos, I normally also showed my BC13 Dutch pressings of the albums up until Rubber Soul, and including Rubber Soul. Well, things have changed in the meantime a little bit. I sold all of the records from the Dutch collection, and I managed to put some extra money, and instead of buying the US mono albums box set that will come out soon, I decided to put those money along with the ones that I got for the Dutch records and buy a UK version from the 1980s of the Blue Box, the BC13 collection. The record, as you can see, at least from the cover, is near mint. I mean, the cover actually looks almost mint. If near mint, I think that is what near mint means, right? But to me, I would very easily confuse this with a new record, to be honest. It looked amazing. This is the case for all of the records in this new BC13 box that I got. It's from between 1980 and 1985. It's very difficult with some of the pressings to tell exactly the year, but it seems to be up until 1985, so completely analog. This is one of them, and actually, you know, as you can see, the sleeve looks excellent. And as I will make it clear in this video and future videos, the pressings are also excellent, and they are in pretty good shape. I would say between very good plus and near mint. This is the record itself. The silver on black, boxed Parlophone 2 box. I think this is the 2 box Parlophone label. This is the same label or similar label that we will see on the Beatles box from Liverpool disc 5 that we have here as well. 1980 stereo press of Revolver. The next one chronologically is not a Revolver issue, but disc 5 from the Beatles box from Liverpool. This is part of the 1980 UK box that I showed on this channel before. near mint condition as well, as you can see. We'll go through the track listing in a few seconds. So this is relevant because of the quality of sound that it has. It's really sounds excellent, even though, again, a little bit bass shy, but still. But because it includes a huge amount of tracks from the Revolver album, and if I'm not mistaken, there's like 10 tracks, or 9 or 10. No, there's 10 tracks of the Revolver album. So basically more than half are here. So aside from the tracks from Revolver, which I will read, you have Paperback Ride and Rain, so the very successful and very strong single that they had as well in that year, in 1966. And they also have their ending with another strong single, which is Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields Forever from next year, from the following year, 1967, in early 1967. But it includes Here, There and Everywhere, Taxman, I'm Only Sleeping, Good Day Sunshine, Yellow Submarine, Eleanor Rigby, And Your Bird Can Sing, Dr. Robert, and Got to Get You Into My Life. I would say it includes the strongest, or a big collection of the strongest songs on the album. I would say that maybe Tomorrow Never Knows is something that they left out, and possibly would have made more sense for it to be in instead of Dr. Robert, let's say. But still, a huge collection of basically more than half of Revolver is on this record. This one I showed, I think, before. It's in the original sleeve. Made in Great Britain, and it's again a 2-box Parlophone label. I'm not going to take it out completely. You can see it through this, I think. Silver on black. So yeah, this one, again, for me it's worth noting because of how good some of these songs, and even I think there have been some discussions on Here, There and Everywhere on this one sounds just amazing. We are moving to more recent times, so I have to mention that normally I would have gotten the mono reissue of Revolver, which was again totally analog from the master tapes from 2014. Obviously that's quite expensive. I actually find it cheaper, or at least kind of the same price range, to buy the entire box set of 2022 on vinyl and to have the mono version on it than to buy the separate mono album. That is just crazy to me. Obviously the one thing that is different about this issue from 2022 that I kind of dislike, or I feel like they could have done better at least, is the fact that they didn't reproduce the cover, the proper cover with the flipbacks that was the original mono issue in the UK of Revolver. But still, it is still good to have. The quality of the record is quite good, so the sound is excellent. It is basically the same record as they released in 2014, just with a different outer cover. The disc, of course, has the yellow and black. This one I will take out. The stereo one I will not take out, but this one I will take out as well. It's the yellow and black Parlophone label, of course, the new version of it, or at least updated version of it from 2022. And we're going to close the vinyl section with a record that basically, in terms of the cover, and this is why I was saying that I would have liked for them to have used the proper sleeve for the mono record, is the stereo version from the box set of 2022, which contains, of course, the new stereo mix by Giles Martin. An excellent mix, and we will talk about the sound a little bit in the second part of the video. Otherwise, the cover looks almost identical, and the record as well. So yeah, this is the stereo new mix of Revolver 2022, sold separately but also part of the box set. Now, let's continue with the CDs. We're going to start with the 1987 stereo CD as part of the sort of the standardization of the Canon collection of Beatles albums, of course. And that moment, basically, the only version of the album that was produced for many years and sold was the UK variation of it, not the US one. Let's open this up a little bit. Of course, it has this very short, 8-page booklet. you know, with the cover of the album, a couple of pictures, the track listing, a couple of pictures as I mentioned. Okay, and the disc itself, I'm just going to take it out. Just the standard black text silver disc from the time. Not much to say. It does sound good, I would say. Again, when we get to the sound, I'll mention a couple of things about all of them. But to me, it's a pretty decent, you know, version to listen to. And I'm guessing this is the one that I've been listening to in the 90s, because what I was listening to was a cassette that was copied of a CD that looked exactly like this. So I'm assuming this is what I actually listened to for the first few years of having this album. Now, the next one, 2009 remaster of the original stereo mix. Now, I'm not sure today if this can still be found as or produced as such. I'm guessing that it's going to be more and more replaced on the market by the 2022 new mix, but still, it's quite widely available. It's not very, I mean, for me, it sounded very good. When I bought it, it still sounds good, I think. But of course, people are starting to prefer other variations like the vinyl one to the CD or the 2022 mix CD to this CD. For me, it still sounds quite good. Where it is on the scale of preference for me, you will find out in the second part of the video. Let's take a look at the disc a little bit. I gave up on those inner sleeves just because I found that some of them were kind of bleeding into the surface of the disc. Not sure why. Unfortunately, they were good to protect it, you know, like the mono ones are, but it is what it is. Still, being so widely available, it's easily replaceable. It was yellow-black parlophone label and the more consistent booklet than the 1987 one, as was for all of the digipacks from the 2009 remastered collection. I showed this on the channel before, I think. Just gonna skim through it. Of course, it has the production notes, the recording notes that were normally on the album, historical notes as well, and the pictures intertwined. Again, a pretty nice booklet. I like all of these booklets. I continue to say I like all of these booklets from the 2009 remastered collection. I think they are excellent. So, 2009 stereo remaster of Revolver with the original mix. Next one of a lot of people's favorite from the mono box set of 2009, mono CD Revolver. Released, of course, in this very nice flip back outer sleeve, perfect copy or very nice reproduction of the original mono Revolver album cover from the UK. Very nice with the laminated front panel. I guess you can see it, right? Still looks very nice. This one, of course, has the reproduction of the inner sleeve. Again, you remember this from my presentations of the mono albums box set, and the poly inner, Japanese style poly inner, which of course contains and protects the yellow and black parlophone label. And that is the mono Revolver on CD. Incidentally, at least for this album, and probably there'll be a few others, not the only mono CD of Revolver that I have. But until then, there is another one, this one uniquely including both mono and stereo mixes of Revolver, but of course the US album version from Capitol. For those who are not super familiar, I said before in the video which are the 3 songs that were taken off of this and had actually been released early in the US as part of the Yesterday and Today album compilation. Let's go through the track listing of the US Revolver. We have Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, Love You Too, Here, There and Everywhere, Yellow Submarine, and She Said, She Said. These were on the side 1 of the original record, vinyl record of course, and side 2 has Good Day Sunshine, For No One, I Want to Tell You, Got to Get You Into My Life, and closes still with Tomorrow Never Knows, thank God. So it starts and closes with the same songs, which kind of give the album a vibe that is very close to the original UK one, I would say. After this will be the last main studio album that will be released like this separately in the two countries. After this, the next one, Sgt. Pepper, of course, will come out exactly the same, both in the US and in the UK. Now let's take a look also at the elements inside. I think again I showed a bit of this before, but still, the inner sleeves from this Beatles US Albums box set from 2014, very nice. The fact that they reproduced these American Capitol sleeves with the commercials to other albums. It's really nice, actually, nice touch. Again, the poly inner sleeve, Japanese style, and the Capitol Rainbow label reproduced on the CD itself. And we're going to close with two other CDs. These are from the box set of 2022. And of course, we have the mono Revolver again as the 2014 one taken from the master tapes, with the yellow and black Parlophone label, which is inside. It's more or less the same disc. And the stereo one, but this time the stereo one, of course, contains the new mix from 2022 by Giles Martin, which is, I don't have to say, but I will say it, and I'll kind of get through it when we talk about the songs. It's an excellent mix. And we will close the showcase with this, well, I think more or less pirated cassette. So from the initially pirate Poker by, then it became Poker by Roton label from the 1990s. It was a Polish label. Then Roton, I think it was, it kind of took over some of the business of this label. I'm not sure about the business details between the two companies, but Roton was a Romanian label at the time, and it was, at least became an official, let's say, mainstream label. This is the cassette. You see, they were not stamped with the songs or name of the band or anything, at least for this collection. You have the Poker by Roton sort of label here on the side, and it shows that it's side A and side B. The numbers of the telephone numbers from that time, which of course do not exist anymore, were Romanian, so it's clear that already by this time Roton had taken over Poker, and they were producing these cassettes, or they were at least releasing them and distributing them, but no sign of what the cassette contains from the cassette itself. The front, let's say the J card, as it's called. It's again, I really liked how they put together this collection. It's really specific to them. With every album was written, had the name of the album written in different color of letters, and the overall cover color around the original album artwork was different. The sort of spine labeling as well was different for each album. It was really interesting. Again, the order of the albums was not appropriate. As you see, Revolver is in this collection is number 10. And the track listing is also different. And they, again, if I'm not mistaken, yes, they have some mistakes in the track listing in terms of the titles of the song. So I will go through the track listing and just compare how it is different. A track listing different on a cassette is not something new. It happened with the original cassettes as well, some of them, because of how many songs could fit on one side, right? So sometimes they need to switch things around. So that's not necessarily different. But let's see. So it starts with Taxman as the original album. It continues with Eleanor Rigby as the original album. Then with I'm Only Sleeping, with Love You Too, Here, There and Everywhere. And this is where the track listing breaks, because the normal album had Yellow Submarine and She Said as the last two songs of side A, whereas this one has Good Day Sunshine and Your Bird Can Sing and Your Bird Can Sing. And then Yellow Submarine and She Said are moved on to side 2. She Said is the opener instead of Good Day Sunshine. Then it continues with For No One, Dr. Robert, I Want to Tell You, Got to Get You Into My Life, Tomorrow Never Knows, and it actually closes on Yellow Submarine. Now, aside from that, of course, the original album has on the second side Good Day Sunshine, and Your Bird Can Sing, For No One, Dr. Robert, I Want to Tell You, Got to Get You Into My Life, and Tomorrow Never Knows. Now, the second part about this is the many spelling errors of the song titles. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. Let's see, Taxman, Eleanor Rigby, I'm Only Sleeping Are Okay. Love You Too is actually not Love You Too, is Love to You. Good Day Sunshine is Good Day Sunshing. I don't know what sunshing actually is. Let's say the other ones seem to be okay. The other ones are okay. So yeah, this is this is the 1990s poker Polish Romanian label Revolver, and you can see the track listing. I hope you'll be able to see it with the mistakes that I just mentioned, captured both on the inner side of the J card and on the back lateral side of it. So yeah, this is the closing of the showcase. Revolver on, all right, pirate tape from the 90s. So now let's talk a little bit about the sound. Again, I've chosen some tracks to listen to in parallel on all of these versions. It was way more difficult than all of the other albums for the obvious reason that I have so many versions to listen to. But before we start with the songs, and by the way, this one I'll try to keep it shorter than usual, but before we start with the songs themselves, I have to mention a few things just so that we can get them out of the way. So the mono versions of the album, both the 2014 one, 2022 one, on CD and on vinyl, sound very similar. I mean, to my ears, they were identical, maybe a pitch of volume here and there, but nothing major. So I really could not tell a difference. When I'm going to be referring to the mono, I'm going to be referring to all of them collectively. Again, I didn't feel any significant difference in the sound and the mixes or anything like that. I shouldn't, because they are all of them declared to be put down straight from the master tape. So that's the situation with the mono. Same goes for the stereo remix or new mix by Giles Martin. The CD and vinyl sound almost identical. Again, maybe a pitch of volume, but that's about it. What's interesting to me is that the stereo press from 1980 sounds quite similar to the two stereo CDs, both the 87 and the 2009 one. I am aware that they all have their, let's say, specific adjustments that were probably made when they were pressed, especially the CDs, right? Because the 1987 one was the first time the Beatles were out on CD, the first time they were digitally mastered, so there were some tweaks here and there. For the remasters in 2009 as well, there were some tweaks. I couldn't tell much of a difference. There are some, but they are very subtle, at least to my ears, or maybe they were in portions of the songs that I wasn't listening to carefully, or in songs that I didn't compare for this video, I don't know. But definitely they were all very similar. I will not treat them equally, so I will talk a little bit about them separately. But at least the CDs themselves, this was the first case since I've been doing these comparisons where two CDs, one from 87, one from 2009, at least to my ear, sounded very, very similar. So I didn't really find any more that significant reverb difference between the 87 ones and the 2009 ones. So I would say that for at least until now, these are the ones that are most similar from the two eras. To close, I will be referencing the Beatles Box from Liverpool record as well. I will not be referencing the US version of the album nor this cassette. I haven't included them, there were already too many, and there was no point. A lot of the songs from the 2014 US box set were actually the remasters from 2009. So, you know, I didn't really see any point in including these two in the comparison. This one sounds pretty good, of course. You know, I don't have anything to, you know, to turn it back for, but obviously already too many options were on the table to compare. So the song that I'm going to start a comparison with is also the starter of the album, Taxman. I know people are not super enthused by this one. It's not on many people's favorite songs list, but I do like it quite a lot. I think it's a very strong opener, you know, very rock and roll type of opening for a Beatles album. I think it kind of tries to mirror a little bit Drive My Car from that perspective. But as well, I feel like it works very well as a connection between Rubber Soul and Revolver. Kind of links them together nicely if you listen to them back to back. And I also think it's one of the very good early mid Harrison compositions. So I like it very much. I have to say that from the stereo perspective, I haven't, and this is what I was saying before as well, I haven't heard much of a difference between the stereo, even the stereo pressing from 1980 as well as the CDs. I like how they sound. Of course, in headphones, it's, you know, there are still songs on Revolver, although the stereo mix of Revolver, I have to say, among the stereo mixes of all of the albums that were mixed both in mono and stereo, is one that I truly enjoy. In headphones, sometimes some of the songs are a little bit jarring because of the hard panning still of vocals and you know, percussion sometimes. But overall, I really enjoy the stereo press, and I really enjoy it more on the speakers when I'm not sitting close to them and I'm somewhere in the room and listening to it. You know, to me it sounds excellent. They sound similar, the stereo ones, at least the original stereo mixes. The mono sounds a little bit better just through the, at least for me, to the virtue of the fact that everything is more centered and focused. But I have to say, and this will, unfortunately, as a spoiler, will become a theme for some of these songs and the comparison that I did. I feel like the 2022 remix really did this album and this song a favor. So it sounds, I think, better even than the mono mixes that I have. Again, this is my opinion. I feel like the fact that they centered the vocals and the drums, but left some of the things panned, really serves this song very well, and it sounds excellent in both headphones and speakers. Sitting close, sitting far away, it didn't really matter. To me, it sounded more powerful and more balanced as a mix. Eleanor Rigby. Now for this one, I really felt like the original stereo sounded very good, and really the only reason why I would prefer the mono to the original stereo is the hard panning on the right, I think, of the vocals on Eleanor Rigby. I really feel like they are pulling my head on one side when that happens. Of course, again, if you're further away from the speakers and you have the speaker set up like I have, you know, you'll not feel much of a difference and you can enjoy this original stereo mix a lot. But you know, when I'm listening to it on headphones, walking down the street or wherever, you know, I really enjoy listening to the song, but you know, there is some you know, something disturbing about having the vocals so hard pans. So yeah, I would say that the mono mix, the original mono mix of Eleanor Rigby, I prefer it to the stereo just because of that. But again, I'll go back to the 2022 mix, which again does a very good job in balancing all of this out. So my preferred one would be the stereo mix from 2022. For Here, There and Everywhere, I feel like I really like the original stereo mix. I did feel like the 87 one was closer to the original stereo press, at least from the one from 1980, in terms of sound. So I think, you know, even the 2009 one was similar, but this one I think was closer to this. I felt like the 2009 one, the remaster, it felt to me like the guitar was a little bit brighter on this version. I know it shouldn't be a big difference between all of these. Like I said, mostly it isn't, but for this one I kind of felt a little bit guitar being brighter. Otherwise they are nice. To be honest, in Here, There and Everywhere, I like the original mix, the stereo mix. I tend to prefer it over the mono, but the one that really struck me was the version, or at least the, you know, the sound of the one included on the fifth disc of the Beatles box from Liverpool. Man, this sounds amazing. So yeah, whether you're in headphones or speakers, if you have this and it's a clean record, play it. It is extraordinary how clean and how, let's say, warm it sounds at the same time. The 2022 one, I like it. So again, Jaws did a very good job at mixing this. I had a weird feeling when I was listening to it. I was close, kind of close, a little bit more distance than I am now to the speakers. It gave me the impression that there were two poles singing. So I'm not sure if this was double tracked or if there was like a very small delay between the sound on one speaker versus the other, on one channel versus the other. I'm not sure if that's the case. Maybe it's not. Maybe it was just me. But to me, it seemed like I was hearing not pole centered, but rather pole twice at the same time. So double pole, if you will. So yeah, I think that's the only thing that I noticed about the 2022 mix, and the only song where I noticed this happening. So maybe it was, maybe it's just my ears, but that was my impression. So right now, in terms of that song, my absolute preference is the way that it sounds on the 5th record from the Beatles box from Liverpool. Next one I wanted to address is She Said, She Said. I know this one had received a lot of comments in the public forums, especially when it came to, I think, the 2009 stereo. I don't know, there's a lot of discussion around it. For me, more or less all of the versions sounded okay, but there are a few things that stood out. In terms of mixes, I liked the original stereo mix, but I do feel like the mono was a little bit nicer sounding. So I felt like the mono was really bringing the vocals up front more, and to me, in that song, which is kind of noisy at times, it's important to hear the vocals. And maybe that's just a personal preference, because I really prefer vocals almost over everything else in some cases. So yeah, I felt like the mono was closer to what I would have liked to listen to when listening to that song. What it felt to be like the original stereo mix was doing was making better use of the drums, so the percussion. They seemed closer and more powerful, although still separated between the channels. I can say that the 87 CD, for instance, was okay. It just seemed the treble was a little bit higher on this one, but otherwise quite similar between them. On the 2009 one, the only thing that I noticed were that the vocals were not as clear, maybe, or brought forth as on the other versions of this album in stereo up until the new mix, right? So I think that's my only main pet peeve. I know there are people have others regarding this song, but for me that was the main thing that I noticed. And finally, the 2022 mix, to me, it does this song a favor. So it does sound better. The separation of the instruments is better, and the vocals now are really up front. You can really hear them, which again is what I prefer. So if I were to be left with a version that I would listen to for the rest of my life, it would be the 2022 stereo mix. Forgot to get you into my life. I felt like the original stereo mix, I like it very much. I feel like there is little difference between the 2009 87 CDs and the original stereo mix on vinyl from 60s, 70s, 80s. To me, the mono version, I just slightly preferable to the stereo one, but not by much. But again, I'm turning again to the 2022 stereo mix, because I felt like this one was really bringing forth better the blowing brass wind instruments. They were sounding much better balanced as a mix altogether, I think. Also, the drumming part is brought forth better, and I felt like it managed to do that without actually taking away from the vocals. So I think that gives me a clear winner, at least for me, when it comes to Got to Get You Into My Life. It's the 22 mix again. And the last song for today is one that I mentioned before, that is one of my favorites of this album, is For No One. For this one, I have to say that it's one of the few where I could not pick an absolute favorite. I do like the original mixes, stereo and mono, very much. I do feel like the mono one has the vocals a little bit closer and warmer. They feel like a little bit more alive, if that makes sense. But otherwise, I didn't see huge differences between the stereo and the mono in terms of the quality of or how I perceive the song itself. I feel like the 2022 mix does a slightly better job at balancing some things, but otherwise it's very hard to pick a favorite. Also, I have to say that I didn't find differences again between these two CDs. I found them quite eerily similar. The only thing I can say is that I think the 2009 one, if I remember correctly, was just a little bit louder in terms of volume than the vinyl, but this is something that I've encountered a lot, right, in these comparisons. So otherwise, yeah, I think this one, I'll probably stick with the 2022 because I have so many other favorites, favorite sounding versions on this new mix, but otherwise, for this one, it was very difficult to choose. So to try to conclude, I guess it's kind of apparent based on the last few minutes that if I were to choose a single version to listen to for the rest of my life of this album, that would probably be the 2022 mix. I know it is not fully analog, or not analog as the original stereo and mono mixes were. I know a lot of people prefer those. For me, this one just, sounds better balanced, and I think that I made the right choice with many of the tracks. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that I cannot still enjoy, and I will enjoy, the original stereo mix on vinyl. Again, this UK 1980s pressing, I really recommend it. If you can find it in a near mint, but real near mint condition, I'm telling you, this is excellent. It will blow your mind. But at the same time, the mono one, whether the most recent presses, either on CD or on vinyl, or of course the original pressing, if you can find some at a decent price and also high quality, they will sound excellent. However, in terms of the mix overall, and again, just to choose one favorite, the 2022 mix, it'll probably be for me. Well, that is about it for today. Again, I want to extend the thanks to the people who have watched these videos, liked them, shared them, the people who have subscribed. I want to say that I will continue with this series. I really am set to do a full series for the entire set of studio albums, plus a few of the compilations that they had. But at the same time, I do look forward in the future of making videos on other records or other bands. There are a few things on the Beatles that I still want to do, and I guess I'll try to prioritize those just because, they have been on my mind for quite a while. In the meantime, aside from exchanging my Netherlands BC13 box set to a UK BC13 box set, I've also managed to get a hold of some copies for some of the albums of the Beatles that I didn't have before. Some of them are for albums that I'm still going to do a video on because I didn't get to them yet. But some are for albums that I already had done a video on. An example is A Hard Day's Night. I managed to get a mono pressing of A Hard Day's Night from the 1980s from Japan on red vinyl. As you may know, or at least some of you will know, Japanese pressings of Beatles albums are not necessarily well regarded among collectors or huge Beatles fans, because they were usually done from second or third generation tapes. They also had some tweaks when it came to the equalizer settings, right, of the pressings that are not necessarily appreciated by those looking for the authenticity of the Beatles sound. But the 1980s represses of the mono albums on red vinyl are very well regarded. They are done directly from the master tapes. They are done on excellent quality vinyl and with excellent quality control, obviously. Also, the Japanese collectors, they are really good at taking care of their records. So that record, and I will show it probably in a future video, looked excellent when it came. It looked new to me. It sounded almost like new. So that was really impressive to see. There will also be others. This was one that I mentioned, but there will be others in that situation, and some of them you will get to see in future videos, I hope. But until then, I want to thank you again very much for watching. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and all of the YouTube stuff, and I hope I'll see you next time.